Good morning. This is Kevin Purcell with the Theotek podcast, and I'm here with my good friends Rick Mansfield. Hi, Rick.
Good morning.
And Antoine Wright. And Antoine and I are both feeling sort of run down and slow this morning. We're dragging today, and that's actually we're starting. If you're not one who normally watches us live and you weren't seeing us up and running at 9 o'clock, then that's why, because we're about 10 minutes late this morning. But we're glad to be here. Again, Wes is away. We'll hopefully be back with us. I think next week, was it when he said he'd come back, guys, or maybe the following week? I don't remember. But
I thought he said next week.
yeah, so hopefully we'll be back to full steam next week with everybody on board. This morning, what we're going to talk to you about is your online presence as a church, things like your church's website, your social media, that sort of thing. And the reason I'm bringing it up and the reason that we're talking about it is our church's website has gone really stagnant and stale. I mean, you can go over and look at it. It's highpeakchurch.com, and I think the most recent post is from May, which is kind of sad. It's I believe was the last time someone posted it. And when you go there, there's a series of pictures across the top. One of them, the first one most people see, is 2 years old. The second one's a VBS picture from a year and a half ago. A senior adult picture, and let's see if I can count them. There are 1, 2, 3 people in that picture who are now dead. That's really sad, isn't it, that we have that. We got one of our youth who's now in college and off in college, and we'd be unlikely to see him at church. And then, it's just, June, I'm sorry, June is the last post that we have, our youth newsletter. And that's the last four are about our youth. So anyway, highpeakchurch.com is stale and stagnant and has now become a target for spam. I moderate every comment, but every single comment is a spam message. There was one of them was for Nike jerseys that I went in and deleted this morning. And so I'm using myself as kind of a bad example of how not to do it. You'd think that maybe someone like me would be a lot more on top of that because, here we are, the Theotek podcast, and we're supposed to be the experts on church technology, but I just don't have time, and so I need to make some time and force myself to get on there on a regular basis and, post our Sunday worship services every Monday or those kinds of things. But anyway, so I'm going to use that as a bad example, and then we'll also maybe talk a little bit about social media and things like that. We have a few stories to talk about. And so let me open it up first. Antoine, you're always good about looking at things with that critical eye. I don't mean that to be that you're critical as a person. You're actually a very positive person. But you see things sometimes differently than the rest of us. And so I want you to comment first about this idea of church websites and what you think should be the role and purpose, and how do we keep it from being so pitiful like mine.
Well, it's interesting when I started with doing web design, churches were my very first client. Every church wanted the whiz bang, booyah, everybody's going to come visit us all the time kind of website. And over the years, folks have kind of gotten to the point that your church's website is one of many front doors that folks will use to introduce themselves to who you are as a church. There are very few things that somebody usually wants when they go to a church's website. All the extra Philly stuff after that are things that the church wants on their website that may or may not necessarily be as used by those that are visiting the site, but maybe a little bit more helpful for those who are in the church itself. And so the first thing I would say, in looking at your website, Kevin, and anybody that might be in a similar position, is just to kind of reset who your main audience for your website is going to be. Is it going to be those persons who are a part of your church, or those persons who might be the occasional visitor, or those persons who've never visited your church before? They're literally coming on a whim or coming to you. And then based on those doors, that's how you end up designing for your site. So if you notice from your analytics, you say you're using WordPress, so if you notice from your analytics that 50% of your visitors are coming via Google search, that means there's there's two, really good possibility of things happening. A, you're definitely not getting persons who are part of your church, but then B, you're getting people who are just searching for what are some churches, in the Hickory area or Southern Baptist churches in North Carolina. They're coming to you from a more generic standpoint, and so what needs to be on the front page of your website and largely on your website kind of has to orient yourself towards that. Service times, ways to connect, special events that they can all join into. The open events that our various communities of worships would have. Beyond that, you don't have as much need for as heavy of a site. I know a lot of churches list on different pages every ministry member, and the trips that they're doing, or they may list, ways of contributing. Those are things that you do, when you have a different audience for your church, those who are, more than the occasional visitor. Some churches might have a content management system and a social networking community behind that. Those are things you do when your church may be a little bit larger, a little bit more spread out geographically, and you use the website to tie everybody together. So those are ways and things that I'd be thinking about for any website, any church site or parachurch site, as to how you design for the right audience.
Rick, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, most church websites that I've seen, just honestly, including one I've been in charge of, so I'll be careful not to throw stones at others here, but most of them that I've seen aren't that great. Now yours looks fairly nice there, but I think part of the problem is most churches say, well, we've got an expectation, we need to have one. The difficulty becomes in maintaining it, and I think that's where a lot of the difficulty comes in over the long haul. And sometimes you have someone in charge of it who, it's just one of their many responsibilities. And so, if it's a busy week, it doesn't get maintained, it doesn't get updated, or you have someone in charge of it who really doesn't know how to do it. And so that's, I think part of it is, Antoine's on the right track. You have to think of your audience, and you have to think of what the purpose is of this site. If it's just information about the church that's pretty static, that's okay. But if it's going to be, if it's going to be a news hub, if it's going to take the place of your church bulletin or be a supplement to that, it's a matter of maintaining that information on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis. And that can become difficult to maintain. I've gone on to church websites where they post sermons, and the sermons might not have been updated for a month or two. Well, that's hard to create a maintained audience that's going to come back there over and over again to get something if it's not updated like that. And I think that's a real challenge, because the most effective church websites that I've seen are usually in larger churches where they have a full-time communications person, but that's difficult for your average church. A lot of the smaller churches just can't afford something like that.
Yeah, I'm the full-time, communications person for us. I'm opening up. Antoine mentioned your Google Analytics. Your WordPress analytics, and this is what ours looked like. And of course, our best day ever was 485 views on a single day, which I don't know when that was. February 25th, 2013. That was pretty amazing. I'm not sure what drove all that traffic, but I may have put a link in an article I wrote over at Gotta Be Mobile or on Christian Computing Magazine or something. But I notice here that the days that we get high traffic, here's July 19th. Well, that was a Sunday, and then you go back to July 12th, high for us, we had 18, and then you go back to July 5th. So it looks like people are coming to our website to see sermons, because I'm guessing that's when we have our Sunday sermon, and I bet people are coming to try to find the message online through our YouTube channel. And so when you go to our front page, again, here's the cautionary tale, don't be like me. We've changed our location. You go to here and click on our YouTube channel. I used to use my personal YouTube channel, but notice what's up there now. It's all Theotek. It takes a while before you get down to where there are actually sermons from or worship services from our Sunday service. And so So I think the thing I'm hearing from you guys is, Antoine, you said number one, maybe you need to change what your purpose of your site is. Am I saying that right?
Not so much change the purpose of your site, but just pay attention to who your site is attracting. Like what you just showed there in your WordPress stats. That's a really good bucket. You realize that Sundays are your most visited times for your site. So that means either people are coming to your site trying to figure out where to go for church, or those persons who visited your church might be looking for a past sermon if it's later in the day. So that orienting the site around, hey, did you just visit us? Or are you looking to visit us? That audience is a way to kind of bend your site around. You look like you've already you've got that YouTube integration happening, but you may need a filter in there, for all of the videos. So that may be a solution
Well,
there.
my problem there is the link goes to the wrong YouTube channel now. See, we have our own separate page, our YouTube channel for our church now, which we didn't have, 3 years ago when I set up this theme. And so that's the issue there. Again, it's stagnation.
Well, you need to talk to your web administrator, Kevin.
Yeah, that's me.
I know.
So I need, and I'm going to do that today. So
you say you have a blog on the church website. A good way to keep to make your blog lively, and I think we've talked about it before, but to use cross-posting services, maybe like an if this then that. WordPress has a few plugins that you can plug in either a Twitter feed or plug in your YouTube feed or any other RSS feed, so that you can pull in content to your WordPress blog from other areas. So if you post something on Facebook and you're like, man, I would love to post this on the blog as well. Well, instead of having to think about posting it in several places, if it's high peak oriented, you post it on Facebook. Things like that are ways to think about taking the one person, your one man shop, taking that one man shop and kind of spreading the wealth across all those applicable areas.
Yeah, and as I look at, let me go ahead and share this so that people can understand what we're talking about when we say your analytics page. If you use WordPress, which a lot of churches do, and I'll start from the dashboard because that's where most people begin. Somewhere on this page is going to be these site stats. If you use this Jetpack plugin, if you don't, go. The first thing you do is go get Jetpack because it's a collection of plugins, and it's fairly simple to set up. If you don't know how to set it up, find someone who does. And it gives you these stats, and so I went into View All to bring this page up, and then, for example, I wanted to know where did we get this traffic. 73 people on July 5th showed up on our page. Where did it come from? Excuse me. And here's the referrers. What that means is what was the page or the site that linked to you, and most of it was search engines. Bing 12 and Google Search 8. That's interesting that Bing was higher than Google Search on that day. And then others, it was highpeakchurch.com is what they looked for. Videos for your business, buttons. Oh no, that's people came directly to our website is what that means, I think. And then here we've got, what did they go look at? Well, streaming is the number one thing, and that's where we get the link to our worship service on that day. And then the home page is the second most, calendar, downloads, and so people are just kind of perusing, it looks like. And the things they clicked on, well, they clicked on this YouTube channel, and it took them to the wrong channel. So I need to figure out how to, I need to get that changed because that's what people, in other words, people were coming looking for the service that day. I know why. We had a special guest speaker, and probably everybody in his ministry, wanted to hear his sermon for that day. And so they probably went and clicked on that YouTube and found old sermons by me instead of by Jamie, the guy who preached that day. But so anyway, this is a good, like you said, it's a good thing to do, and it just takes time. It just takes effort, right? You just got to look at it and be prepared. And I think what you said about the if this then that. Rick, have you ever used that? If this then that.
I'm not.
Okay. If this then that is a great website and service. And I've got an account, and then our church has an account, but I just have never really done much with it, with the church account. All I do is I set it up so that when someone posts on our church, it goes to our church's YouTube, not YouTube, but Twitter feed, and our church's Facebook page. And so that way, whenever there's a post on our site, it goes to those. Well, there aren't very many posts. And the only person posting right now is we have a volunteer who's done some WordPress in the past, and she's the one who posts the youth stuff. And that's really all she has time for. I guess if I asked her to post some other stuff, she might be willing to do so. But, I have one other person that used to post a little bit, but, he's obviously quit. And so you're right, that's a good solution, IFTT. It means if this, then that. And what it does, you tell them how that works, Antoine.
Sure, you set it up to connect to different web services or even your mobile device, and it pretty much enables you to take content from one area and push it to another. So if you, for example, you gave the example of if I post on Twitter, it can take that tweet and automatically post it to Facebook. If I put a picture up on Flickr, it can also download a backup of that picture into Dropbox for me. If I walk into a room, or to a different area, I can have that, and for my Android device, then it can trigger an alarm to go off. I can get a weather report every day sent automatically to my phone, at a certain time that I set up. I can even control light bulbs and light switches and all that good fun smart things, Internet of Things stuff from there. It's pretty neat for those kind of items.
Yeah, and so for a church, let's say what you could maybe do. I don't know how well this would work because I've never tried it. But could you maybe like every once in go and look at web pages and have a special service set up like I don't know, Pocket or Instapaper or something like that, where if you link a website that it automatically posts a link. I don't think that's a good idea, to be honest with you. Now that I think about it, you could do that though, right?
You could. It's not a bad idea.
You don't think that's a bad idea?
No, it's not. I mean, if it's so if you have a specific Instapaper or Instapocket or Evernote workbook, and you put a link in there, and you say every time if I post a link in this category in this notebook, automatically post that to my blog on WordPress. That's something that if this then that can do. You have to be mindful of what you're putting where. I have a Google Calendar set up. That's a public Google Calendar. Every time an event is added to that Google Calendar, it tweets a new event Google Calendar. So those are things that can be done. To take advantage of the site has a little bit of movement to it, and because again, a church website is useful for specific purposes. What time are your services? Who's the pastor? So stuff like that.
Just to hash this out, let's say I'm looking at your article that you posted a while back on Church Tech Today about 3 areas of mobile ministry. And let's say for some reason I felt like this article would be of interest to my church, and I don't have time to sit down and write a full post about it. I could save this to, say, a special Evernote folder with some stuff about why this is interesting, and then if this then that would automatically post the link plus what I wrote about it to my church website blog, right?
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. So that takes and I guess it would grab maybe this picture. Do you think as the automatic picture of it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's one way to add some content quickly without having to work a lot. So if you just did that once a week at least, it would make your church website look a little bit better than mine does now. Well, and then also, we don't have it now set up this way, but we used to have. Let me go back to it. We used to have. Where did I guess I left off the church's website. we used to have our Twitter feed up here, like somewhere like right up here, but then I changed it so we don't have that anymore. But if we had a lot of tweets, that would actually update the page and make it look a little fresher than it is now if someone's tweeting regularly. Or I guess I could integrate our church's our Facebook page, which is really kind of our church's primary site for inside the church. Is we have, I'd say, probably half to 2/3 of our people are in our church's private Facebook page, and then we also have a public Facebook page, and that's really where I spend more time, because it just feels to me like we get more traffic and interest on that. I can post some news on this page, and probably because it's so static, people just don't think to go here anymore. But because of that, I've been using Facebook, and I get a lot more interaction from the church people on Facebook because of that.
Right. So one of the things to maybe look at the Facebook channel on If This Then That, and see, if an item is posted on your Facebook page for your church, then automatically post that to your church's WordPress blog.
Yeah, I've always been going the other way, actually. So we could set it up to go both ways, maybe.
That's one way of kind of utilizing, or at least not the hardest thing, and Rick said it earlier, is maintaining your website.
Yeah.
It's for churches. It's always going to be a hard endeavor unless you have a dedicated team.
Yeah. Now,
or an extremely person.
Do you guys still believe in church websites? I think they're a must, but should they even be your primary method of communication with your people?
I think that they're still very helpful when they're maintained, because, again, Facebook is great, especially for interaction, but when people just want to have information, I think the first place that they'll look is for a website, whether it's a church member, whether it's someone who's interested in the church is going to go. That's what I've done in the past. I want to find out about a particular church. Maybe I'm thinking wrong, but I don't think to look at Facebook first. I just go to a web search, and I put in that church's name. And so I think it's important to have some kind of presence. But again, purpose and audience, like Antoine said at the beginning, is very important.
Okay. Well, thinking about, we mentioned using Facebook as interaction. I do think that a website is a must. You have to have one, at least, if nothing else, as an online brochure. And keep it up to date. If something changes, if the information changes, change it on the website. Because even a small church in the country like ours, I've had people come and visit and say, "Well, how'd you find out about us?" "Well, I found you on your website." And I've had others say, "Well, so and so invited me, but I went on your website to decide if I wanted to come." And so it's a must, but it's also not the only thing, right? And so Facebook and Twitter and other social media, like we use YouTube, I consider that more content than social media, but it really is social media. I should look at it differently, shouldn't I?
It is.
Go ahead, Antoine.
I say, yeah, it really is social media. Granted, I think Rick would agree with me there. The definition of social media is that it's not just broadcast, but it's interactive. It's not just content, but it's responses to that content.
That's all I use it for with our church is broadcast.
Yeah, I think it's important to be on all of these venues. Website, Facebook, Twitter, and then you can decide. Is Google Plus important? Maybe not as much, unless you just have a bunch of people that are going to be following you that use that. But I think at least those three: website, Facebook, and Twitter. And of course, that'll change, in the future. But that's a matter of staying on top of what's relevant when it comes to social media.
I think I agree with you about that, especially. The big ones are, of course, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is probably up there as well now. I don't even know if we have an Instagram account for our church at all, but that's become a very popular thing. That almost everybody, it seems like, when you see the links to social media on other sites, those are the three that you see most often, aren't they?
Well, Kev, I would tell you even. To figure out what social media works best for your church, I would actually poll your church. I do it to teens all the time. I ask them what's their top 3 apps. Um, and it's really cool watching their parents freak out because their parents are not on 2 out of the 3. But you can figure out what their top apps are, the top social media sites that they're on. That's a way for you to figure out where to focus your energies. You know that already that Facebook is going to be number one. Instagram might be a place that they use very often, but they may not consider looking for your church there. But they might consider looking for your church on Snapchat or Periscope or Meerkat or Pinterest. So really key. I would try to figure out from your church, because there's a lot of social networks out there, and you can use a service like If This Then That to cross post to all 10,000 of them. But if you're not there, if you're not interactive in those spaces, then it's going to be just some more noise, more signal, more noise. So you really want to find just a few, and then focus there.
And you mentioned the word cross-posting. I think that's important too. Every church that I've been a part of, you've got communication issues, and it seems to go 2 different ways. Often the church staff will have difficulty getting messages across, getting information across, and then at the same time, sometimes a member will say, "Well, I didn't know about this," and say, "Well, we let you know about it here, 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 and here. How come you didn't know about it?" And so it's a matter of being in all of those places and being consistent, because if you're not consistent in any one of those particular places, people aren't going to go there to find information.
Yeah, I struggle with this just because of a matter of time. What do you guys think are some? We've talked about setting up these services for cross posting, but Rick, you have gone on this. I don't know how well you're doing at it, but you told us a while back that you're doing a post a day on your personal blog. How's that going?
It's not going very well. It's a similar principle that you just get busy, and you just don't do that well. Now I'm probably down to about once a week. I'd like to be 2 to 3 times a week, but for a while there I wasn't doing anything. So I'm better than I was, but not where I'd like to be.
Yeah, I think in a church life, updating weekly is probably enough in order to keep it fresh. If you want it to be really, really a really strong presence, you probably need to do it more than that. But what kind of content would that be, and who would be in charge of it? I guess the other thing we're sort of saying is we're all busy, and you really can't do this alone. If you're the pastor, you can't do it alone. Or if you are the media technology specialist in your church, you probably do. Maybe you do have more time for that and doing it on a regular basis. But if you have another task, the youth minister or the music minister or somebody who's got a position in the church, that position fills your time like nothing else, and then you're trying to add this on top of it, you're probably going to let that slide when it gets busy and when crunch time comes. So you really almost need somebody, a volunteer or a paid staff person who makes this not their primary necessarily, but one of their top 3 primary tasks in the church, right?
Yeah, and if it's once a week, it's announcements. That's what you're probably doing if you're doing it once a week, and I think that's perfectly appropriate.
Yeah, putting your bulletin on the website, basically.
Right.
Of course, a lot of churches don't use a bulletin, not so much in traditional church like mine, but a lot of more, I don't know what the term for it is anymore. People find every term you use insulting, but a lot of churches that don't have that traditional mindset, they don't use bulletins, and so they put that stuff online. And then again, when you post it online, then use social media, tweet it out, Facebook it, Instagram it, even Google Plus it if you got a lot of people there. I think Google Plus is on, as far as a social media place, I think it's on life support, to be quite honest with you. Antoine, you're someone who's kind of plugged in on the social context. Is there a social media that's really important today that we're not thinking about? You there, Antoine? Well, I guess he's frozen or something, or having trouble. What do you think, Rick? Is there one that we're not talking about that's really important that you can think of?
That's a good question. There's a commercial on TV where these guys are in an elevator and two of them over here, the other saying, "Hey, are you on Woo Woo?" And they say, "Yeah, I'm on Woo. I send out Woots every day." And so they go into their company and say, "Hey, we're going all out on Woo Woo. Create a product page, create a placement." And then they show him getting back on the elevator, and the guy says, "Are you still on Woo Woo?" And he says, "No, I'm not on Woo Woo. My parents are on Woo Woo." And, and I don't even, sadly, I don't even remember what the commercial's advertising, but it's got a good message there that these things change so quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 years ago it was MySpace, and uh, these and who's on that anymore? I guess it's still there, but
Yeah, it's there. I did a Google search for something. I don't even remember what it was for, and the top result was a MySpace page, and I was
wow,
thought, wow, I've not seen that in.
yeah.
Whoever that was must have been like the greatest MySpacer going on right now.
Yeah.
But
But you're not going to want to invest your time there.
no.
And I don't know what's going to hit tomorrow. We kind of thought that Google Plus would, and it hasn't really. Like you said, it's kind of on life support, and they're actually taking away features from it now. They're removing the photos and so forth. And so it's difficult. I don't think that you have to be everywhere, but like Antoine suggested, take a poll of your church members and see where they're at. And some of our church members aren't going to be in any of these places, and so we still have the printed bulletin on Sunday. But I don't know if everyone needs a copy of that printed bulletin. If that's created on Thursday or Friday, that could be emailed out to or just posted to a lot of our members, and a smaller number of them made for the people who need to see it in print on Sunday.
And we're talking about the bulletin as that's an old school thing, and it's an offline thing, and the crazy thing is I'm hearing a lot about email newsletters are sort of all the rage today in the technorati, and so maybe we need to get back to that. Maybe I need to get back and revive our email newsletter that I used to send out every single Friday as sort of a bulletin with some. Primarily, that list now has become an instant emergency prayer request list. But I used to every Friday morning I'd send it out with what's happening this Sunday, what's going to go on the next week. I know one friend of mine who pastors a neighboring church, and he sends me his every week, and he puts a devotion in there and even gives sort of a highlight of what the sermon's going to be about, so it gets people thinking about it before they come, and maybe I need to get back to that.
Well, see, you got stuff like that. MailChimp, based out here in Charlotte, they've been excellent for a lot of people for doing just that, and they even plug right into your WordPress site. So you could send out a newsletter, and then that newsletter would show up, or a link to that newsletter would show up on your blog. It could show up in your Facebook feed. So you're hitting all of your areas. But newsletter is a really good way to kind of repurpose your bulletin. You can turn your paper bulletin, instead of a fold up, three-fold or two-fold piece, into just a single sheet, front and back. This is who we are. These are our service times, and on the back, have whatever respective notes or pointers to where the church is present in social media or on their website. Those are ways of you save a little bit of paper, but at the same time you wouldn't lose that the interpersonal touch of somebody receiving something in their hands. A little bit less to clean up at the end on a Sunday as well.
How does the MailChimp integration work? I've used MailChimp incredibly sparingly.
I'll have to go back and I'll go back and look at it, but I do know from newsletters I receive and some of their team members who are some friends of mine here. That's what some folks use. They use their in a sense, using their newsletter as a pointer to get people to their website.
I'm looking at this. I just went into our WordPress backend, and if you go over here to plugins and add new, on the left-hand side, it's about two-thirds of the way down, halfway down, and then I search for MailChimp, and of course it comes back with 12 pages of things.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, is one of these the official that you're going to get the best experience, or?
I would look off of MailChimp's page and see what they would recommend.
Yeah, probably, because two of these are using. Well, 3 or
Well,
4 the actual MailChimp icon, but that's the only one that's the real one. But anyway, that's a good point. I maybe I'll look into that. I have our host provide no our email for our church is set up for when you used to be able to do Gmail for free for up to up to 50 people. It used to be you could get up to 50 accounts for free on a Google Docs and Google Apps for domains. Now you got to pay $50 per account. But so what I did was I set up a Google group through that, and it's a private Google group that you have to. It's not advertised or anything, but people tell me I want on the email newsletter, and I would add their name. And so we've got most of our email in that from our church members. So I'm curious how I would, get those out of that and put it in MailChimp or whatever. But that's how I've been using it. Well, let's talk about. We've been talking about things to do. What about some things not to do? And Rick, you said that you've got kind of one of those stories about how an online presence can sometimes be a negative thing for the church and cause problems in a church. Do you want to go ahead and share a little bit of that now?
Yeah, let me mention two things, because I thought of another one after we talked before the show began. This is my opinion. Granted, and even when you're trying to be apolitical, I realize it can come off as political, and I'm not trying to do that. But I see a lot of people who are pastors or ministers who will they become very political in online presences, and I feel like that's a mistake if you're trying to be evangelistic, if you're trying to interact with a wider audience than your church. Let's assume that most of the church agrees with you, although that's not probably a good assumption to make. But to me, if you take a particular political stance online, and let me back up a second. To me, all these political issues are secondary issues. Compared to the central message of the gospel. These are secondary issues, sometimes tertiary issues, but the issue of the day becomes a primary issue. And when people take these stances online, to me that immediately shuts out a particular audience that is just not going to listen to you anymore to hear your primary message, which you would want to. And so I think that people need to be really careful. They need to step back and think about these things. And I realize that sometimes those lines are blurred, because I realize that sometimes moral issues become political issues, and you want to take a stand. But again, I think we just need to think about things before we say them and just eliminate a potential audience. That's on one hand. And then something very particular that I mentioned to you this week. I think that we have to be careful, whether church staff or church members, about what we post online. I have this very week. I don't know. I doubt these people will be listening to this podcast, but I'm not going to mention anyone by name anyway. There was one of our church members who just got online, and this was not even in a Facebook post that he had started. He was responding to someone else, completely off topic, and was just very critical of church staff and the things that we were doing at church and so forth. And after he had posted these long rants, 3 or 4, I just got on there. I didn't call him by name, but I said, "You look, I believe it's very inappropriate to say these kinds of things in a public forum, such as Facebook." I said, it's very easy to pick apart, but it's much more difficult to be thankful for what we have, even when it's not perfect, to be kind-heartedly supportive, even when we disagree with something. And he, within about an hour, all those posts had been removed. He had just taken all of those down, and he came back the next day and he apologized, and he said, "I've talked with God about this," and he said, I just ask everyone's forgiveness. But I think it's those things that we sometimes don't think about, that we want to just get online and rant about something that's really private when we're doing this to a public audience. And so, again, these are just the kind of cautions that we need to think about before we write, especially if there's going to be a large number of potential eyes that can see it.
Yeah, we talked a while back about like a 10 Commandments of church social media or something like that. Didn't that was quite a while back, and And I think Antoine and I had sort of said we were going to write that up and, make something of that, and then we never really followed through on that, did we? We sort of posted it, I think, on that.
I think we did it on the comments to the YouTube video.
I might have it on the web posting that I did about that episode, and that's kind of as far as we went with it. And I think some of it was like what you're talking about, Rick. I think it had to do with those kinds of things. I probably need to go and look for that again, and maybe we can follow through on that, Antoine and Rick, and if we can come up with something along those lines to make that, I don't know, try to drive that and push that out there and get some interest in
we have that. I was looking for earlier in our conversation even. I know I've seen it in the last 2 weeks, probably week. I read way too much. But there was actually a comic, and which is really bad because I really don't know where I saw the comic. But it said kind of almost like a 10 commandments of what should be on your church website. And it said, this is what we have on our church website was on one frame, and this is what people came for on the other side. And the two didn't meet. You had two, a person with two heads kind of thing going on. And it's like Rick said, it's really important that we think about what we're posting and how we're posting it. I agree. Certain political topics we should probably bear away from or do our best to, if we're going to mention it, mention the centrality of the gospel in the midst of it, or even the conflict of the gospel, with a daily topic or whatever the topic of the week is. We should be also mindful of comments. And how we allow comments on those particular items. You mentioned earlier having to moderate a lot of spam comments. There are some topics that we can post on our blogs, our church blogs, that are great for feedback and interaction. There are others that probably don't need a response, and we have to be pretty smart about taking comments for those, maybe turning comments off on that area when we post those items up. Yes, that's totally it.
Yes, social media right here. Honor God with public and private content. Honor brothers and sisters publicly and privately. Be ambassadors of family, church, and the kingdom. Treat it as public regardless of the privacy settings, and back up your social media content. And I think that fifth one is the one that I break just about every time I post something online and almost never do anything to back it up. But I think this is at the very minimum, the top four things are absolute necessities, and that fifth thing is probably a good idea. But the top four have to do with morality, in my opinion, and so we need to remind ourselves of this. And who knows, maybe I should save this picture again and tweet it out or Facebook it or whatever, and see if we can't get some more. And here it says pin it right there. And of course, I'm never on Pinterest. Do either of you guys Pinterest?
I'm so not active on the Pinterest channel,
which
is
I'm
bad
not
because Pinterest.
I've got an account, but I don't ever do anything with it.
Yeah, Pinterest for me is that thing my wife used to do an awful lot. She seems to have no, interest in it anymore. So I don't know. I think she still goes on it for teacher ideas, and that's really about it. So
that's what my wife does.
All right. So in other words, one of the things we're talking about is the don'ts or the do's and don'ts of it have to do with this idea of what we're talking about in these 5 commandments. Basically, it's love your brother and sister and love God in your social media life, and be respectful and honoring to people. And that if that person, Rick, that you were talking about had that as his first thought when he began to post that, he might not have even began the post. Or I do this week even, I sent an email that was difficult to write to somebody I know, challenging them for something that was posted not on a church thing but on my own personal thing. And before I hit the send, I prayed and I read through it, and I had someone else read it and said, make sure, am I doing the right thing here? And of course that person agreed with that I should send it, and so I did. Sadly, the person I sent it to that I was challenging what they had posted didn't take very kindly to it. And the most frustrating thing about it, is that's a painful thing when someone doesn't react well to your challenge. But anyway, so these are important things, but there's also some do's and don'ts when it comes to your church website. We talked already about keeping it up to date, and that has to do with you going there a lot. And I'll tell you my sad story or my bad story about church thing, besides what I've already shared with how pitiful our website looks right now, is about 7 years ago when I first came to this church. I set up the website, and then I added a discussion forum in it, which, that was fine. Of course, no one used it, and because no one used it, some pornographers found a way in, and there was pornographic images in our church's forum that were public for everyone to see. Now, you had to sign up to comment, and I was supposed to get approve everyone who came in, but somehow they got in without my approval. And I mean, it was just littered with the most disgusting pornography you can imagine. And so that was quite astonishing when one of my church members came and said, "Have you seen that stuff that's on the website?" And of course I was like, "What do you mean?" And I went to the website and there was nothing on it. I didn't even think about the forums. And then I began to dig and look around, and I finally found it. And the forum, which I again hadn't looked at in probably 3 months, it had about 30 different posts about links to and pictures of pornography right there on our church's website. And I was mortified. Of course, I quickly pulled down the discussion forums, and they haven't been up since. But so that's another thing is, be very careful that that plug-in for WordPress that I mentioned, the Jetpack, has some things set up that are supposed to filter out a lot of that spam comment. And I actually, while we were talking this morning, went in there and looked, and there's somehow that Jetpack filter, something got updated, and that Jetpack filter got turned off. And I think that's why I became such a target for spam. And so we'll see here in the coming days. By the end of the day, I'll know, because I've been getting 3 or 4 things a day. What about you? Are there some, Antoine, do you have some special story or something that you want to share as a kind of a cautionary tale about your online presence?
You guys kind of have nailed pretty much all of my cautionary tales about the oops, if you will. The most effective parachurch website actually that I built was a one-page website. It was one page. It had just a neat little JavaScript feature in there to move a few panels around, but it was very effective. It was very efficient. It was extremely search engine friendly, extremely, because it was just one page, and it made it I made it such that it was very easy for the ministry owner to go in and update it. Yes, I taught him HTML in order just to update a little blurb of content on there, but it was designed such that it didn't need his attention. It didn't need his constant attention, and it was efficient and it was effective. That's the best how-to that I could say. You don't hurt yourself by having too few things on your website. You do hurt yourself by having too many things. So, I mean, if you know that you can't manage a whole lot for your site, seriously, it's okay to be a static site. Just keep it simple. What things do people need most when they get to your site? They need your name, they need your address, they need your service times, they need a means to maybe send you an email and a page or your Twitter page, to see if there's any other kind of media that the church is sharing. I know that sounds like extra blah and extra simple. There's no great grand statement of faith and no picture of my pastor and his wife giving the thumbs up and all that stuff. But you don't necessarily need all of that. When your church website really is, just getting people associated with who you are. You can use that as kind of your bridge and go from there.
That's a great point. Anything else that you guys, we're coming up on the 10 o'clock hour, and of course we started late, but.
Yeah, I would just say, we've all talked about this. You talked about like having someone else look over what you said, and we talked about thinking through things. I think in the bigger picture too, when we're dealing with internet, when we're dealing with social media, there's so much ugliness that's on the internet. The internet can be such a powerful positive thing, and it can be such an ugly negative thing at the same time. And I'm convinced that a lot of the nasty things people say to each other on the internet, they say because they're not sitting across from them. They're looking at a screen. The screen somehow gives the illusion of anonymity when there's really no such thing. And so, it's one of those things that it's the same with an email. It's the same with any message we send. Would I say this to the person if they were sitting right across from me? And then there are some things that may be best said when we're sitting across from someone. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the convenience and ease of these tools that we forget. Sometimes it's that personal contact that works best. And I think that's just something to keep in mind too.
Yeah, well said. Well, I think we covered a lot of what we wanted to cover this morning. If you have any thoughts, those of you who are our listeners or viewers, any thoughts on this, something that maybe we didn't talk about, please feel free to contact us. You can put comments in the YouTube video below, or you can hit us up on social media. I'm on Google Plus as Kevin Purcell. That's KEVINPURCELL. And that's the official place where you can find this podcast. We go live through Google Hangouts every Friday morning at 9 a.m. If you want to watch us live, that's the way to do that. Just follow me there. Of course, you can quickly, if you do that, you can find links to other things. If you go to Theotek.com, you'll find links to the rest of our team members and their social media, their online presence, if you want to follow them. But contact us. Let us know if there's something that we've left out, or if you disagree with something we've said or whatever. We'd love to hear from you, and feel free to include it. We do want to we had some people reach out to us in the last week asking for some advice and help, and we appreciate that. And we'll always, if it's the kind of thing that we feel like you'd like us to share widely, we'll do so. I don't know that was the case in this instance, but we do appreciate it. And I think this kind of wraps it up and puts a bow on it, and I appreciate, as always, Rick and Antoine, you guys being with us. We look forward to next week when Wes will hopefully join us, and who knows what we'll find to discuss next week. But it's always the church and Bible technology that we're dealing with. You guys have anything you want to share here at the closing?
I guess not.
Okay, Antoine.
I'll have something to share in a couple weeks' time.
Okay.
Once all the details are final, I'll have something cool to share.
All right, great. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. This has been the Theotek Podcast. Bye.